ここからは任天堂スイッチのヘッドラインです。ご覧ください。
For the first time in 10 years.
Peggy 18.
Oh. Oh God, really? Well, okay, it'll be hard, but I will try my best. Alright, Nintendo, let's do a thought experiment. Let's put you in the shoes of your target audience. Or somewhere between 7 and 9. You are so terribly tiny that when you see price tags, you don't think about an empty wallet or a credit card charge. You think about how willing or unwilling the taller people who give you food will be to drop portions of this imaginary measurement system to the underpaid clerk behind the register so they can hand you your funny box that lights up and makes you giggle. You're between 7 and 9. It's 2011. Your family is like any other family. It has its problems, although these you can't seem to recognize behind the silver sheen of your paper violet eyes. You remain distant and oblivious and innocent and confused, and you hate homework and math and grammar, and you don't even know why school exists. You just want something fun to do, something that stimulates you so well that the days feel shorter, that the sky becomes a short animatic of barely moving pictures. When the teachers at school ask you what you want to be when you grow up, you say nothing, because in this very moment you just realize that things age, that children grow up, and you, in all your brilliance, can only think of how excited you now are to be without a bedtime. In spite of your violent hatred of education, you manage to do well enough in school for your parents to be satisfied, and since they are satisfied, you need to take advantage of the situation post-haste. See, there is a new funny box that lights up, except you can control the lights with a funny remote, and all the kids at school are talking about it. And it is apparently life-changing. Now honestly, you doubt that this new funny box could ever even stand a chance at remotely contesting Optimus and Lightning McQueen, and there is no chance in hell it could stand up to SpongeBob, but all the kids have it, so you must have it, because although you don't know it yet, you are already a trend-following loser. Anyways, you tell your parents about it, they look into it, their eyes almost escape their faces as they see that this funny box will cost them many more portions of their imaginary measuring system than any of your other funny boxes. They sigh a heavy, tired, exasperated sigh and look at you with an exhaustion you don't quite understand yet. And then they say, "We'll think about it." That is not a no, and therefore this is a legendary victory, and you do not waste time to celebrate by jumping up and down, much to the dismay of your parents. Some time passes, and eventually you come home from a long day at school to find the funny box on the kitchen table. You let out an infernal screech so terrifying that neighbors actually consider calling the police. You watch impatiently as your father attaches the strange colored ropes to the television. You sit with your remote and put on the strap that you will forget to put on in the future. Your screen comes to life. You put the strange disc into your funny box, the very first disc that will ever go into your funny box. It's Super Mario Galaxy. Now, you've heard of this Super Mario guy, and you just don't get it. You don't get how a plumber could be even half as cool as someone like Spider-Man, but you decide to keep an open mind. You press both A and B, you make a new game file, and then it happens. Almost instantaneously. Not happiness, not excitement, not stimulation, or even euphoria. wonder. Everything changes. You now have so many answers to these questions that were irrelevant to you before. What do you want to be when you grow up? You want to be a vet. You want to be a bodyguard. You want to be a construction worker or an interior designer. Wait, there are grown-ups who make these experiences, who design and cultivate entirely original sources of wonder. You want to be that. Whatever that is, gods you want to create, funny little boxes that light up and make children all around the world laugh and giggle and dream and wonder. You want to make wonder, and you're not the only one. Can you feel it? This empire of dreamers, of wanderers and wanderers daring to push past the border of what's expected, what's seen, what's wanted, what's needed, what can inspire. You can feel it. It's palpable. Now, remove yourself from the experiment, but keep your focus on the wonder. This wonder, it's you. It's what you've done with your influence. It's how you've affected millions of children and even adults all around the globe. It's a beautiful, insatiable, insurmountable force of inspiration. Now let's talk about how you fucked all that up. In the game industry, Nintendo is sort of always the hot topic of a buzzing conversation. Of course, there are several powerful forces when it comes to the selling and marketing of video games, but Nintendo is kind of in a league of their own. Zelda, Metroid, Pokemon, Mario. These are the sort of franchises that are the reason other franchises even exist, and all of them are under Nintendo's large umbrella. They are the leaders, the patriarchs, the kings of the system. Their words move mountains and bring profit, and the other big dogs typically don't waste time to follow in their footsteps. Which is why this is all so concerning. I don't want there to be any confusion about what this is. I'm going to be spending a lot of, perhaps even a majority of my time discussing Nintendo's recent decisions regarding their new system, but I will also, more generally, be aiming to make an emotionally charged, nuanced critique on Nintendo as a company and as an overseer or even a godfather of entertainment. Nintendo is no stranger to criticism, mostly because of strange business decisions that I will get to later, but this time they really rocked the boat out of the lake, onto land, and into the tall grass. Nintendo's decision to price their products in the ways they have just now revealed have left a lot of their fans in valid turmoil. We are expected to pay at least $450 to purchase Nintendo's new system and $70 to $80 to purchase new Nintendo games. Obviously, the anger, resentment, and disappointment many fans feel needs no explanation. More people are standing against Nintendo and their business decisions than ever before, but despite this, there is still a considerably large group of people coming to the defense of the game company. In my discussion of Nintendo's decisions and why I believe they are so heinous, I may also take the time to refute many of the arguments I see commonly made in Nintendo's defense. Let's start with what everybody is talking about.
Drivers, start your engine. $80 for Mario Kart. Why? How?
could Nintendo possibly think it is reasonable to charge $80 for Mario Kart? Well, typically, Mario Kart is a game about kart racing on several Mario-related maps with several Mario-related characters. This concept stays the same as the games go on. They may add new gimmicks and mechanics, but at the end of the day, it is a linear game about kart racing. Mario Kart World is not that. The game introduces an open world map that may at any point be explored by the player or players, in which I would assume they would engage in a numerous amount of side activities and enjoyable group minigames. Mario Kart World is a game that offers freedom, the ability to let the player or players break through the map and drive through all this unique and whimsical world has to offer. And it is precisely this new change that absolutely and inarguably justifies the new $80 price tag. Right? Well, no. Games don't get to cost more for innovating. Even if I pretend that open world Mario Kart is a groundbreaking, never before thought of concept, so what? There was never a Zelda game like Breath of the Wild before Breath of the Wild, but that game did not get to cost extra simply because it was different. Metal Gear Solid was groundbreaking, Skyrim was groundbreaking, Mario 64 was groundbreaking, Minecraft was groundbreaking, Baldur's Gate 3 was groundbreaking. These games do not get to cost extra simply because they have broken new ground and opened new doors. But why shouldn't there be a reward for innovation? Innovation is the reward for innovation. You don't have to raise the price of your game if it is truly innovative. If your game is genuinely spectacular and unexpected phenomenal change from the expected, then you don't have to do anything to receive the financial fruit of your labor. Billions of players will flock to you, will praise you, and then will flock to you again when you release something else, because they know even the spit out of your mouth is liquid gold. Your name will be on a short list of names so legendary that this happens when any of you are mentioned.
I am talking about Hideo Kojima, the creator of Metal Gear Solid, and tonight's industry icon. It's gonna get loud, Hideo.
And this goes both ways. I could very easily spend the next 20 minutes talking about how I don't think this is a good direction for the series. I could easily spend the next hour discussing how I believe it is indescribably damaging to the core formula of this series to make the almost random decision to turn Mario Kart into Forza Horizon without a story mode. But I will not do that because none of this matters. Firstly, because I am not a dedicated enough fan of the Mario Kart series to have a fully informed opinion on how the majority of the fan base will receive this, and secondly, and most significantly, value does not dictate a game's price. Because a game's value is something that can only truly be judged once a game has gone gold and hit the shelves. Then, and only then, the price can fluctuate downwards or simply be given away for free if it did not meet expectations. But it is important to note that even after a game's hyper-successful release, the price never fluctuates upwards. This is because it does not have to. Such a colossal number of people are purchasing the game in different points across the globe that worrying about the price of an individual copy becomes a greedy and petty waste of time. But, moving past Mario Kart and onto the next launch title, okay, whatever. Moving past Mario Kart and onto the next game. Donkey Kong will be $70 and not $80. This matches the prices of many AAA games in the current market, and many have taken this as concrete evidence that an $80 price tag is exclusive to Mario Kart. I do not see why we would make this assumption. I cannot for the life of me begin to understand the thought process behind pricing these games so differently. So I cannot really make judgments on what this means or doesn't mean. All that is truly known is that we have two big first-party titles that are confirmed to be coming to the Switch 2. Both are being developed by promising teams who have brought success before. Both should be full-length games. My best guess is that Mario Kart is priced higher to coerce poor saps into purchasing that bundle for $500. Certainly in character for this company. And as much as I'd like to say that means we won't be receiving another $80 game in the future, I can't say that in good conscience. It's likely Nintendo is simply dipping their toes into this new price range, seeing whether consumers are willing to purchase video games that are priced this high and then reacting accordingly to whatever happens next. If anything were to go wrong, Donkey Kong would be there to catch their fall and pick up sales. But by this point, I think it's safe to say most consumers are willing. The system itself being $450 to $500 is very expensive, but not quite as ludicrous as the game's prices. The most common argument against this is simply, what about inflation? I think I feel my skin scrunch up and fall off my muscle whenever I hear this. It's mostly because in order to make this argument, you have to A, hate fact-checking, and B, not know how inflation works. There's actually a resource specifically for this. Although this argument is technically correct in several cases, in several other cases, it is blatantly incorrect to the point of wild hilarity. Even if this argument was valid in every single case, it would not matter. Inflation is something that is constantly changing, because that's the point. Because of this, defending for or arguing against game prices using inflation as a point of evidence typically ends up being an over-complex and worthless endeavor. I mean, if you're thinking about inflation, you also have to take into account how hiring rates and payment wages have changed. And the economy is currently crashing, so I digress. Once the defenders using inflation as a talking point disappear into the hallways of their local Starbucks, I typically hear a menagerie of voices complaining about how none of us ever criticize Sony for being greedy money grubbers as we do for Nintendo. Firstly, that is incorrect, but I get what you're saying. Sony released their PlayStation 5 for $500 at the peak of the pandemic, and even though they were criticized at times, they are not receiving the treatment Nintendo is now. There were certainly not many people calling for a community-wide boycott of PlayStation and their system. It is a criticism that makes sense on paper. Well, earlier we were discussing how value does not dictate a game's price. It's time to talk about what actually dictates a game's price. Production. The manufacturing cost of a PS5 is $450, so the system is priced at $500 retail. This $50 difference is called the profit margin. In 2017, the Nintendo Switch cost Nintendo $257 to make, and consumers had to pay $300 to own one. Making a profit is typically the goal for every company. Nintendo and Sony make millions upon millions of systems and have to ensure that they are making money selling their products rather than losing money. The manufacturing cost of the Nintendo Switch 2 is not public information yet, but it could very well be $400 or more considering that the system has better and therefore more expensive hardware than the original. This would admittedly explain the system's price, but I'm still a bit disappointed in what we are receiving for paying that price. It's conflicting that Nintendo expects consumers to pay $100 more than they would have to pay for the Nintendo Switch OLED, considering that that system possesses both a far superior screen and several more hours of battery life. But Mozie, you said the value of a system doesn't dictate its price. Yes, I did say that, skeptical viewer who is also a longtime fan of Nintendo's products, and I meant it. Value does not dictate the price of individual games or game systems. Value does, however, validate that price. If players don't find value in a game or a game system, they will become disinterested and even hateful of that system or that game. This is true for all products, not just video games. Like I said earlier, in the case of some games, the players may find the experience so indescribably disinteresting that companies need to sell it for much less than its original price just to convince people to even think of purchasing it. Obviously, the value of any particular game cannot truly be known until that game has been released. Respected critics in the industry can only publish in-depth reviews of a game a few days away from the game's release, and even then these reviews are subjective. No one can truly form a foolproof opinion on anything until they have experienced it themselves. but even still, we can make estimations, we can take educated guesses on how we would feel about something, because we know our own preferences, we know what we enjoy, and we are not stupid. Approached by this price, I feel disheartened about having to pay so much more for a system that does not possess two of the positive qualities its immediate predecessor does. There are, of course, ultimately many more improvements than there are shortcomings, but without a doubt what is missing is significant. Arguably, the Switch's greatest selling point was its status as a hybrid between console and handheld. Mobile gaming was reserved for games like Candy Crush and Minecraft. The idea of a handheld system running anything remotely similar to a AAA experience was foreign and fantastical. Suddenly, the Switch is announced and gamers will be able to play open-world Zelda on the bus back home after a long day at work, at their best friend's house after a long day at school, in their bed because they're too lazy to go downstairs. Although there had been attempts before, some more remarkable than others, Nintendo dominated and reinvented this category. The Nintendo Switch was immediately and almost objectively the household name of modern handheld gaming. Everywhere you went, you could hear friends discussing whether they were taking their Switches with them on a fun outing, mothers scolding their children for taking their Switches with them everywhere they went. For fuck's sake, the name Switch is in reference to the ability to switch from docked gaming to handheld gaming at a moment's notice. But the wonder dies just a little bit when you're only able to do this for 2 hours. These losses, these changes, are the difference between deciding to purchase a system and deciding not to. It would be very understandable for someone who already has a Nintendo Switch OLED or even an original Nintendo Switch to feel like they are making a kind of downgrade. It would be very understandable for someone to argue that the Nintendo Switch 2 is not worth the price because of things like the battery life. And this is just what we have when we choose to ignore the system's competitors. Valve's Steam Deck became a big name in the handheld space practically as soon as it dropped. The idea of portable PC gaming was another gamer's fantasy unlocked. It ran smoothly and it looked good. However, the Nintendo Switch quite frankly cost less money. It might have been older, but it got the job done and it had nice games. All these years later, they have seemingly switched places for $50 less than the Switch 2's base price, and for $100 less than the bundle. You can get a system with the same battery life and the same storage, a system with a well-established library of 5,974 games that won't cost you your next 5 paychecks. Are you a big PlayStation fan? Well, congratulations, because almost every single game they have is here. It is not insane to say you would rather take a Steam Deck, God of War, and Baldur's Gate 3 for $520 rather than a Switch 2, Mario Kart, and Donkey Kong for $570. But even so, these are hypotheticals and comparisons. The point is to raise questions on whether or not the Switch 2 is a system that offers as much value as it could. This is not to say that the Nintendo Switch 2 is a system that will fail. It is far too deep into its success for anyone to make predictions on its failure, and it is not my goal to convince you not to buy it. Although I've spent quite a bit of time discussing why I consider the $450 price tag expensive, I want to make it clear that I'm not particularly bothered by it. I believe it's a lot of money to ask for what I'm being offered, but I'm not upset about it. It is within the price range for a system of its class and standard. It only truly becomes despicable when combined with the $80, $90 games. If this was a $450 system with $60 games, this video would be much different. Pairing an almost $500 system with almost $100 games absolutely changes the thought process behind every purchase of a Nintendo Switch title. This makes it extremely hard for an everyday consumer to feel confident about purchasing a AAA game. The more expensive a product is, the more hesitant you become when approaching the idea of purchasing it. If you aren't insanely rich, purchasing anything pricey is a decision that comes with a lot of thought. You spend $10 on Undertale and find out you're actually a weirdo freak who can't take enjoyment in this beloved masterpiece? You only lost out on $10. Who cares? You spend $90 on Mario Kart and discover this is your least favorite entry in the series? Holy fuck, I lost $90. I could have saved that shit and bought Expedition 33 and Oblivion Remastered. I'm going to kill someone. Of course, Nintendo, this information is wholly irrelevant to you, Nintendo. Your console's a success. It's sold out everywhere. There is no way you won't be taking advantage of the consumer's willingness to spend this much on your products in the future. I'm sure the next Zelda will be $90. I'm sure the next Pikmin will be $90. But when you do things like this, you're not only changing the market that surrounds you, you're changing the market everywhere. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you will always be at the top of the world. Each word that comes from you will be mimicked, if not today, then tomorrow, if not tomorrow, then next week. There are companies out there making a genuine effort to make AAA titles more affordable, and when you price your games this way, you are actively stepping down. By setting a new standard, you are changing the standard for everyone, and no matter where you live, now is a time where we need more affordable entertainment. It's just not sustainable anymore. So much is happening. So much thought is being put into what might happen next. We don't need this. We don't need to have to fight with ourselves any more than we already do when it comes to purchasing something that makes us happy. There are millions of people who can't afford video games as they are priced now. We make continuous efforts to make things more affordable, not simply to do so, not simply to say we're taking money away from companies because companies don't deserve to have money, but so we could perhaps find a way everyone benefits. Companies pull more purchases from consumers, dedicated fans get to buy more product, and people who aren't doing well have the opportunity to just maybe purchase 1 or 2 games once a year so their kid can have something to distract them from the many problems in their family, because most families have problems. I'm not trying to engage in a discussion about the pros and cons of capitalism. I'm not trying to say I know the solution to expenses simply being too much. There's a larger discussion, a larger fight that has to do with the management of funds, the raising of pay wages, and the establishment of systems to aid those who need aid. Me specifically, am in a situation where I need aid, where I need help because times are difficult, but there are games I could play, games that have provided me with reprieve. Me, a 20-year-old woman, can dive into these titles to catch a break from the bad shit I'm going through. I cannot imagine what games like this can do for a kid who really needs it. I know not every family is going to be able to afford video games no matter how we price them. I know that these families have much bigger problems than the fact they can't afford to get their kid the new Switch. I know. But when we actively raise the prices of things we don't need to raise to support our employees or gain a good profit, what are we doing it for? Nintendo, whether your games were $50, $60, or $70, I know you'd do just fine. Because, you're you. There are people out there who worship you, whose entire career or lifestyle is based off the shit you've made in the past. I know you'd be just fine no matter what. I know you didn't need to make Mario cost $80, but I also know that in your head, regardless of the circumstantial, more money is simply better than less. I know that you're aware people would buy dirt from you as long as it came with a Pokeball, a green tunic, or a mustache attached. I know you know what you are. So this was probably an easy decision, but I don't think it was the right one. I think you'll do fine. I think your console will succeed. I think any attempt to boycott against your insane pricing decisions will ultimately fail. I think other companies will even follow in your footsteps. But I think your choices will eventually bite you in the ass. I don't think it'll be worth it in the end. This trade you're making, giving away what was left of your reputation for deeper pockets, I think it'll blow up in your face. I don't think it's worth it. To have fans that aren't really fans of you, not like people are fans of Xbox or PlayStation or Steam, where they manage to at least somewhat support the companies behind the games they play. I think your fans will love your games about as much as they'll hate you. But funnily enough, I didn't entirely share that hatred. Even with the $80, $90 games that I've been ranting about for God knows how long, I only had a strong dislike of you, not a hatred. I was in a position where I assumed everything that was wrong with you was the result of ignorance. Why is Nintendo so ridiculously quick to sue? Why do they strike down and report creators who do nothing but bring them more business? Because of ignorance, I'd say. I simply thought you were uneducated about the internet and what happens here. That when you saw people making videos about your games and their soundtracks that you consistently refuse to release online, that you somehow thought that these people were stealing from you. Thought that these people didn't care about you and the things you've created and developed. When you strike down entire channels, attempted the assassination of people's entire careers because they were discussing the emulation of your games. While you offer no meaningful or well-developed means of backwards compatibility, I summed it up to simple innocent stupidity, an influx of wild inhabitable foolishness that has seemingly cursed your company. I disliked you strongly. It was a dislike that was most likely about to become a hatred. But I had seen game companies make entire 180s before, and despite everything, I thought you had genuine care for your fans. These games were so good, so well made, and you always put such effort into making sure people only received the best products. Most of the time. You had to have cared. You had to. All of these terrible things you've done must be the result of ignorance and misinformation. That has to be it.
SWAT is 1084 at Fisk Tower. All units stand by. Warrant is en route.
Why do we have tutorials? Seemingly a simple question. In the context of video games, we would say a tutorial is the process of teaching the player or players the permanent and mandatory mechanics by which the game functions. Simply put, it is how the player learns to play. It's necessary. Why do we have tutorials? Why do we have instruction manuals? Simple. Necessary. Not all that interesting. Just a mundane obligation. Press R2 to swing. Not any depth, just instruction. Press R2 to swing. It's easy. I can do that. Wait. Something is wrong. That cannot be all there is to the tutorial. Let's try again. Why do we have tutorials? Let's move away from games and generalize this term. Tutorial. Merriam-Webster defines the tutorial as a paper, book, film, or computer program that provides practical information about a specific subject. Oxford defines a tutorial as an account or explanation of a subject or task. Why is this important? Why would I waste my time discussing something so simple, so devoid of expression? The tutorial. Press R2 to swing. How could I ever convince you that the statement of 14 letters could possibly hold any significance at all? Let alone to our subject matter. The tutorial is not simple, it is not mundane, and it is most certainly not devoid of expression. The tutorial is the single most significant moment in any game. It is a universal constant. Press R2 to swing. You will press R2 to swing at several separate moments through countless possible intervals across a limitless board of hypothetical heights. The tutorial is not supposed to be the only boring part of an exciting experience. It exists not in spite of a game, but because of it. The information processed here in this moment is a burning star that will explode into microbes of sensation. The tutorial is the pinnacle of game design. We often forget that before it was monetized, turned into an industry, a conglomerate, before it became a system poked with holes, filled with flaws, learning was the process that defined stimulation. In this game, you will press R2 to swing, but where else? When else? Miraculously, almost everywhere else one could swing, you will press R2 to swing. This moment, this tutorial, informs games of the future and games of the past, a secular canon event. Merriam-Webster defines the tutorial as a paper, book, film, or computer program that provides practical information about a specific subject. Oxford defines the tutorial as an account or explanation of a subject or task, but I will define the tutorial as a chemical reaction, the junction between learning to do something and actually doing it, stars and colors and shapes. I think for a while tutorials were something exclusive to individual games, and non-related to game systems. For consoles, the closest thing we had to a tutorial was the creation of our Mii's or Xbox avatars. And I suppose that within the context of being an introductory, educational experience, the creation of these avatars fit the criteria. We learned what button selected things and which button went back, but that is incredibly limited and rudimentary when you realize the depth of what the tutorial can actually achieve. And yes, I know, this sounds rich coming from the gal who was just glazing a static screen and a button prompt, but I feel the distinction lies in the fact that a lot of the tutorial's nuance is in the theatrics, the aesthetic, the charm. The creation of these characters can of course be theatrical and charming, but most definitely not in the same way that it is theatrical and charming to swing from the rooftops for the very first time. In November of 2020, accompanying the release of the PS5, Sony unveiled Astro's Playroom, a customary pre-installed game that came with the system. The game was barely a few hours in length and presented itself as a sort of tour around the insides of the game console. Players were free to explore Memory Meadow, GPU Jungle, Cooling Springs, and SSD Speedway, as well as the hub area, CPU Plaza. Despite being a glorified advertisement for a system you must already own to view said advertisement, Astro's Playroom was engaging and stimulating. It had well-designed platforming, beautiful level design and environments, but best of all, it had superb fan service. The game is really just a very long tutorial for the PS5's DualSense controller, and we know this because the game tells this to us. Supplying a game system with a tutorial in the way Astro's Playroom did expanded on the level of wonder that could be present the very second you unbox your PS5. They attempted to bottle rocket ships and oceans, beaches, and battles all in the palm of your hand, and even still, you sprint through seemingly searching for something familiar. I don't feel this is a particularly hot take, but the first hour, the first 30 minutes, the first 15 minutes of every experience is essential. As a game designer, you want to wow, you want that wonder factor. Ironically, I believe that Nintendo is the best at this. If tutorials are the pinnacle of game design, it is typically Nintendo that offers the peak of the pinnacle. Nintendo tends to give entire landscapes to the premise of introductions. They dedicate whole worlds to the task of teaching the player how to play. And in doing so, I find that the player doesn't even realize there was a tutorial. Almost like the game never taught them, they just knew. It is the highly subtle ways we teach and the beautiful ways in which we engage the student that makes the process of processing progressive. Originally, the news that Nintendo was taking their own swing at a more expansive type of system tutorial was incredibly exciting, at least to me. I think with the many differences between the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2, a tutorial is generally a good idea. Obviously, they wanted Welcome Tour to mirror Astro's Playroom, which is fine, because Astro's Playroom is great, but you know what it also was? It was also free. $10. Nintendo is charging you $10 for an explanation of the system and how it works. So when I first heard Nintendo was charging their players for an explanation, I assumed it was $1, like 99 cents without tax. Then I heard it was more than that, and I was horrified. I went, $5? God, I wish! $10! They are charging you $10 for something that could fit into an email. Yes, I argue the tutorial is the pinnacle of game design. Yes, I argue the tutorial should never be the boring part of an exciting experience, and yes, I argue that making more intensive and stimulating tutorials that work as system overviews is an essential step in the progression of the video game market. I think that Astro's Playroom accentuates and supports my arguments flawlessly, but I also think that even this early, I doubt that this office space white paint minimalist garbage is anything remotely similar to Astro's Playroom. And look, I really don't want to come off as a PlayStation glazer. They make me angry all the time, and they make me livid every single time they think they can get away with re-releasing the same game for double the price. But Astro's Playroom was good. It was one of their best calls. It was free. As a critic, it's hard to criticize something customary. This, however, I can talk about. No, please, tell me I'm overreacting. Tell me it's gonna be worth it. That it looks better than it is. Wait, maybe I haven't taken a good enough look yet. Maybe I'm being too judgmental. I say they're charging us $10 for an explanation, but it's more than an explanation. No, it's an experience. With great levels like Maraka's physics demo, find the biggest rumble, and last but not least, dodge the spiked balls. How could I ever call this passionless? Like this. This is the most passionless, witless, uncreative, mediocre showcase for anything I have ever witnessed in my life. I've wanted to be a video game critic since I was in high school, but the simplistic act of viewing this gameplay almost made me reconsider my passions. This anger is genuine. I don't like this, but this hyperbole and exaggeration is a type of artificial simulation meant to entertain you. If it did entertain you, even a little bit, I guarantee that my rant will provide you with more fun than the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour ever could. It's funny, you might think I'm harsh, but this whole time I've called this experience a tutorial. Well, in the comment section of Welcome Tour's Treehouse Live, most refer to it as a virtual manual. What are we doing? Genuinely, what are we doing and what is happening? Nintendo, you have always been the cheap bastard that never lowers their prices, never shares, and is always in a constant state of aggression to people who do nothing but praise you. You do not also get to be lazy money grubbers who got their understanding of game design from a kid's coloring book from Applebee's. And I want to make it so clear that if you have purchased the system and then purchased Welcome Tour, this is not me making fun of you. It is the absolute opposite. I am fucking infuriated for you, and I believe that if you are going to go out of your way to give your money to a company for a product that was made to entertain, then you should be entertained. You should not be in the faculty meeting space of an IKEA. I don't want to hear that the game needed to have a price tag to be successful, because Astro's Playroom is the largest example of how a game doesn't always need a price tag to bring success. And even more importantly, if you have purchased the product from a company, you should feel like that product exists because of you, not in spite of you. I feel like a lot of people will ask me why I'm mad at a tutorial for looking boring, and I guess if you're saying that, you skipped over everything I said earlier. I mean, I've spent all this time glazing tutorials, and I'm not done. Tutorials are also tools of accessibility. If you were to play Astro's Playroom, you would get a good sense of how bright your game should be, how loud your game should be, how strong the vibrations of your controller should be, among other things. As game designers, allowing tutorial spaces to players prior to them playing any game at all allows them to fine-tune the system before they move to the heavy experiences. This prevents games from being sullied by general confusion or accessibility issues. But once again, what's even more important to think about as designers is our gamers with disabilities. I know that to many of you gamers without disabilities, you might find it a bit ridiculous to believe tutorial spaces could aid gamers with disabilities, but genuinely, these spaces can provide so much more benefit than you could imagine. Obviously, what matters most in the process of making video games more accessible to those who are disabled is providing more accessibility options in-game and more controllers and devices that are friendly to those with low mobility. But tutorials add so much to this process. By giving gamers a chance to experiment in a space that is non-demanding, we make the experience of fine-tuning settings and setting up devices one that is calming and as reduced a frustration as we could possibly manage. These things are extremely important. I will die on this horse. We need more accessibility options. We need more low mobility friendly controllers. It's a lot of work. I'm sure it is. Do the work. If you are not passionate enough about your games to make sure that as many people as possible can play them, then you do not care enough. Nintendo is the only company out of the three with no official low mobility controller, The only company out of the three with accessibility options that would have been revolutionary in the early 1800s, and now the only company out of the three whose manual doesn't come in the box, but instead can be purchased for $10 in the digital shop. In this video, I've made a lot of loud, bombastic, blanket statements, exaggerations, and hyperbole. This is not exaggeration or hyperbole. I mean every word. I mean the tone. I mean how it's said. These practices are blatantly and obviously ableist, and it disgusts me. The fact is, accessibility isn't profitable. It is just the right thing to do. But if there isn't a profit involved, Nintendo isn't interested. Obviously, this is fucked, because we can explain away the game prices with technicalities and analysis. If you're a type of person, you could even blame it on inflation. But there isn't a good explanation for this. This is just awful. This is my hatred. I rage not at the box, but the box's insides, and I surmise that as a company, what's fueled my hatred, my rage, is the laziness. Said it once, say it a million times, Nintendo has always been cheap, but God, I never took them for lazy. Pre-packaged pedestrian copy and paste pesticide product, $10. Could have bought Undertale, but you might have hated it. You only lost out on $10. Who cares? A virtual manual, a paid appetizer, a charged refreshment. You only lost out on $10. I care. $10 6 times is 60. I think things build up, and when we do take risks, even small ones, it shouldn't be on things we are obligated to. I've been talking for a long time, and writing for longer. I feel this stone in my chest, this lump in my throat built like a callus, and I think I never took them for lazy. Feel like I was a different person when I started this script, not because of the material, but because of what happened while I went over the material. Nothing really surprised me. I was and still am disgusted by the insides of Nintendo's arrogance, but I am not shocked. I am not shocked they marketed a stolen, downgraded version of Discord as an entirely new, never-before-seen product. I am not shocked that they will remotely disable your Switch 2 if you modify it in any way they do not approve of. It is not shocking to me. I feel like it's easy for people to hate cheap companies like EA because they make expensive trash. They are just as soulless as Nintendo is, but their products are always awful. But it's hard to hate the company that gave us Mario, Zelda, Metroid. I get it. It's hard to remember that this company attempted to sue a supermarket in Costa Rica because its name was Super Mario. These things don't have easy, technical, overcomplicated explanations. The explanation is greed, lethargy, indolence. What is there to say? What counter-argument is there against that? Well, I'm sorry, okay? I grew up with these games. I work every day. I don't have a disability. I have enough to afford it, and I'm sorry to the people who don't fit into those categories, but ignoring something that will make me happy won't do anything for them. Why should I have to punish myself when life is punishing enough? Don't I deserve to have something that makes me happy, something that I want? If this console was half as important to you as it is to me, you'd understand. That might sound pathetic, but it's how I feel. This video is not a call to boycott Nintendo. It's too late for that anyway. This is not to say that I think boycotts are pointless. I'm participating in several. They can be very effective, oftentimes essential, but one was already called and it didn't work. Not surprising to me, because all attempts before were unsuccessful. This was probably the closest we've ever gotten, but it still didn't work. Regardless, I will not be buying a Switch 2. And I honestly don't really know if I see myself buying any Nintendo product in the future because of how much their business decisions disgust me. I do not know how to explain how much this saddens me. The first section of this video, if you even remember after all this time, explaining empathy to a multi-million-dollar megacorporation, where I attempted to put Nintendo into the shoes of a child in their target audience in 2011. Well, that child was me. My very first real game system was the Nintendo Wii. And my very first real game was Super Mario Galaxy. I was a neurodivergent child with extremely poor motor functions. I was going to therapy for it. But I could play Super Mario Galaxy. Compared to the other Super Mario games, especially 64, its control scheme was a lot more basic and easy to understand. This made it a very good game for me to be introduced to. I don't think I'd have my dreams or my passions or my wants if my parents didn't buy me a Nintendo Wii and Super Mario Galaxy. I have believed and still believe wholeheartedly that the Zelda series is the best designed video game series of all time. It's not my favorite though, that's Resident Evil, but Nintendo things, they mean a lot to me. Even if I pretend that they don't. If you bought a Nintendo Switch 2, or you bought Welcome Tour, or Donkey Kong, or Mario Kart, or even an online subscription so you could use their shitty Discord knockoff, I get it. I am not judging you, and I will never judge you. I understand being tired. I understand wanting a break, and I understand if you thought a new Switch and Mario Kart were the only two things that could possibly help with your depression. I get it. I wouldn't advise you to give Nintendo your money. If you think the choices they make are fair or just or simply business, I'd disagree with you. But this video wasn't made in spite of you. It was made because of you. Because I think you deserve better. And when I think about my dreams and my passions and wanting to be able to support myself by talking about video games every day forever, I think about you. Yes, you. The person who would have made, all these hypothetical counter-arguments. Because if this video can do anything, I want it to be able to make you think about the difference between what you paid, what you received, and what you deserve. I think you deserve the very best you could be given, and I want to tell you that over and over and over again. That doesn't mean I want you to destroy, throw away, or even return the Switch 2 if you've already bought it. I just want you to put the box down. Preferably before you even open it. But if you've already opened it, that's okay. And after you do, just think about everything, all of it, all together. Think about what you're most excited for. Think about their stupid policies. Think about how much money you paid, and don't even ask yourself a specific question. Find the very first feeling you can feel and grab onto it and just sit in it for a while. And no matter what that feeling is, whether you don't really care or whether you never want to see Nintendo's logo again, it's okay. I hope these games are everything you expected. No, I hope they are everything you wanted. In the difference between what I deserve and what I want, I find myself rolling in a bed of questions. I really wish this company, this organization, could be better than they are. Because I actually really wouldn't mind giving them the little money I have. I played Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the people close to me, and there are memories there. I'm skeptical of the new game, of course, but I wouldn't mind giving it the opportunity to give me more memories with these new people I care about. It sucks that in growing up, and leaving behind the girl from 2011, my eyes are reorganized and sanded. They see clearly now. I'm stalling. We're reaching the finale, and I guess I just like the sound of my own voice. Alright, I feel like the best way to summarize and conclude my own thoughts is actually to bring up my experience with another game company. Sega. If you were to watch any of my older videos, you shouldn't. But if you did, you'd probably hear me randomly insult Sega, even though they have nothing to do with what I was talking about at the time. This is because around the time I was experimenting with YouTube, attempting to make videos and find my style of game journalism, was around the time that I played Sonic Forces. I genuinely believe that Sonic Forces is in the top 5 worst video games of all time. Like, I tried to like it, and I know that a lot of people don't like it, but my hatred of it, it's unnatural. I think it has the worst level design, environment, storytelling, platforming, theatrics, voice direction, and music in a series that I actually enjoy a lot. I used to say that Nintendo treats their fans like shit but takes good care of their games, and Sega treats their games like shit but takes good care of their fans. To me, it was always a question of which was the lesser evil. I always chose Nintendo. I don't think I was right for that. I played Sonic Frontiers, and I didn't hate it. I played Shadow Generations, and I really loved it. I look at these games, the things that they offered, the leaps that they were making, and I realized that Sega started to take good care of their games because they took good care of their fans. That the two were powerfully linked. If you're passionate about the people you make media for, you will make yourself have the resources and the time. Eventually, you'll figure out how to make good product. You can make yourself better as long as you have the care. But you can't synthesize that care. You can't artificially produce passion. I don't want this video to make people pessimistic. After all this, I don't want your takeaway to be that this greedy, lazy, ableist company is being rewarded for their shitty, awful practices, and there's nothing we can do, and everything is awful, everything sucks. I don't want you to think that just because this video isn't a call to boycott, that we are sitting in a bomb watching the numbers tick down. I said many times that companies will follow in Nintendo's footsteps. Some already have. I think the thought that Nintendo has already changed the market everywhere is really scary to some people. I claim that they have. I argue that they have stepped on the efforts of people smaller than them, people who are trying to make things better. And I say that, and at the same time I look through my lens into you, and I promise you, optimism is the smartest choice. Everything is going to be okay. If you've bought the Switch 2, and you are feeling regretful or upset, it will be okay. If you're worried you won't be able to afford nice games in the future that you'd really want, it'll be okay. At this point, you may be confused. How? After everything I've said, how could I be so critical and passionate and still preach optimism? How could I say these things? You know, I recently saved up a bunch of money and actually achieved a dream of mine. Purchasing a good gaming PC. Now, $1,000 is a lot more than $450, but it came with a month of free Game Pass, so I wouldn't have to spend any money on new games, and a month of Discord Nitro, so I could stream some of those new games at top quality to my friends. It came with a free, high-quality mechanical keyboard and a matching mouse, so that it was just as good. It was a large, shining, beautiful, funny box that lit up and made me giggle. I had never had a PC before, and there was some confusion, so it took a while. But the box came with a manual, and in the corner it said, "Thank you for purchasing." Right after that message, there was a link to a very organized Q&A section. Like I said, it took a while, so I moved impatiently, attaching the familiar dark wires to the ports of my monitor. I sat in front of my keyboard, with a controller in my lap, and I waited. As the screen finally came to life, everything working, instead of playing the new Doom game, which is amazing by the way, the very first thing that I did was take the time to re-download a game from 2015. I stared as the logos loaded, breathed heavy as the menu came in. I moved to set the graphics to their highest for the very first time. I sighed exhausted as the game told me this would require a restart. I restarted the game. I watched the colors move, the intro roll, and then it happened. Almost instantaneously. Not happiness, not excitement, not stimulation, or even euphoria. Wonder.